The finance minister yesterday at a press conference said she's monitoring the capital markets morning, afternoon and evening. She also promised India that you will not see any more delays when it comes to the economic package. Her first focus was to try and get the finance bill passed. Didn't give details, but that's where ET now comes in, right? And here's my colleague Ruchi Bhatia, who's picking up some exclusive details when it comes to this economic package. Hi Ruchi, good afternoon. Expectations running high on how the economic package must address every stakeholder of the economy. We did see one cabinet meet today. The economic package not out today. All stakeholders coming on board. What's on the cards?
Well, Nayantara, the expectation was running high that perhaps today's cabinet meeting will give details of the much talked about economic stimulus package. But you heard the finance minister Nirmala Sitharaman yesterday saying that work is on, deliberations are on. In fact, they're speaking to all stakeholders. Those discussions are at its peak, and very soon we will be hearing on what the look, the shape and size of this economic stimulus may look like. Having said that, I'm given to understand that the economic package now that the government is looking at, which will give the much needed relief to the common man, to industries, may be finalized by the end of this week. So perhaps we could hear about it over the next few days. My expectation is perhaps either this Friday or early next week. I'm also given to understand that to fund this big talked about package, the economic stimulus package, the government will have to look at increasing their own borrowing program for FY21. FY21 borrowing program was set at 7.8 lakh crore rupees in the budget. There is a possibility that the government may look at widening their own fiscal deficit. Remember, so far we've heard that industry has sought additional spending by the government to the tune of 1% of the GDP, or close to 2 lakh crore rupees, and the package's size could be along the same lines, which would mean that the government will have to borrow extra funds. Having said that, I'm also given to understand the talks are currently on between the government and the RBI to do so. RBI may be asked to directly buy some government bonds. This is an extraordinary measure. This is not something that we have heard so far ever the RBI do it. This essentially means that RBI will be asked to do what global central banks are doing. They will be asked to print more money. Directly buying of bonds may allow the RBI, the central bank, to fund India's fiscal deficit target directly. This is something, let me just say this once again, this is something that globally we have seen central banks doing, but in India the central bank has never taken a step like this. This would mean that the government, the suggestion is that the central bank, the RBI, buys these bonds by the government by printing fresh money, printing new money. I'm given to understand these talks are currently on. The plan is yet to be finalized. A final call is expected very close to the borrowing meeting that is scheduled for the first half of FY21 on Monday, on the 30th of this month. The government is also assessing the fund requirements at this point of time that the states would need if DBT-like mechanism or DBT-like scheme or cash transfers have to be done. So I'm given to understand that the government has, in that sense, made up its mind that this package has to be a big package to support the economy, to support the needs of various sections, for which they will have to print new money, get more funds coming in, and perhaps a higher borrowing program is something that is likely in the days to come.
Right, so that's one important aspect of the economic stimulus that we're picking up, how it's going to be funded. Ruchi Bhatia, thanks a lot for joining us with that exclusive story. Now, with the lockdown, there is, of course, a lot of panic, a lot of disruptions that you're seeing. One of the sectors which is panicking with disruptions and impacts everybody, you, me, our parents, our grandparents, our kids, everybody, is healthcare and pharmaceuticals. There is a real scare there. How do you access medicines? Will we see medicines reaching every corner of the country and all of that? Pharma companies are, of course, in a huddle. They're trying to figure this out. Vivek Iyer from our research desk that's joining us with that. Hi Vivek, many thanks for joining us. This goes beyond just the pharma delivery companies. We've heard and seen those images of how those accessing the godowns are being physically abused by police in a couple of cities. Having said that, it's a big worry for the pharma companies also to make sure that they can get even life-saving medicines across the length and breadth of India.
Amidst the nationwide lockdown that we are seeing at this point of time, and given the fact that the common man has actually faced some amount of a trouble even getting the basic necessities like groceries, while the PM as well as most of the governments are working very hard to ensure smooth supply of groceries as well as other essential items. One section of society that is at this point of time facing tremendous amount of pain is actually the pharma industry, or the industry that actually manufactures the drug, that is the healthcare industry. Now what we are understanding is that, and what the Economic Times is reporting is that a lot of these companies are actually facing a significant amount of trouble actually getting employees into the factories. Given the fact that they still don't come under the essential services list, there have been reports of harassment, etc., and employees not being able to actually go ahead and enter factory premises. Now the other thing that is happening, number one, given the fact that employees haven't been able to enter, and also a lot of the factories are actually running out of the raw material or the API required. So given the fact that transportation has almost come to a standstill, also the printing that is required to put to put on the packages, again something that has actually come to a standstill. Overall, this particular section is quite alarming, given the fact that there could be a shortage of drug in case the lockdown doesn't get lifted soon. At this point of time, I don't think there's too much to worry, given the fact that there is a significant amount of inventory or buffer that is there in the system. However, if this particular lockdown extends further, there could be some amount of pain in terms of availability of medicines.
Well, it's day one of the lockdown, and that's just one of the sectors, but it's a very important one, facing a lot of disruptions. Same situation with groceries. In fact, we saw a meeting today the government held with e-commerce companies. On one hand, you have the Ministry of Home Affairs coming up with an advisory: don't put yourself at risk, don't go to shops, press on home delivery. But the other end, the home delivery companies are not able to access their godowns. Clearly a big problem that is brewing over there. And in the midst of all of this, most stakeholders of the economy wondering, where is the economic stimulus package? When is it going to come? A stitch in time saves 9. It has to be a big one. In the US, you're talking of a $2 trillion stimulus package. Now, as you just heard my colleague Ruchi Bhatia report, how will India's economic package be funded? Well, partly by increasing the borrowing program as well, for which RBI is also expected to bless the deal. Let me go across to Maithili for more on this, our in-house expert, consulting editor. Hi Maithili, this is a story that Ruchi Bhatia just broke a short while back about how one of the avenues being considered is a higher borrowing program. I think it's pretty much a given. Forget the fiscal deficit targets, it's gonna have to be breached. The next problem then is how do you fund the stimulus package? Borrowing, a good way to go?
Well, yes, I think there would be no alternative really but to increase the borrowing, especially since the banks really don't have any demand for their credit from companies. So they do have surplus funds which can be invested in government securities. So that would be one way. Another way, which I think the government has not yet spoken about, but I think it needs to be considered, is the RBI directly funding in the primary auctions. Because ever since the phase out of ad hoc bills earlier during the 80s, the government used to borrow directly from the RBI. It was called funding through ad hoc bills of Government of India, and the RBI was directly funding it and basically increasing money supply. But that was phased out by an agreement between the government and the Reserve Bank of India, which is done during Dr. Rangarajan's time as governor of RBI. And because it was felt that, yes, it does lead to higher inflation and does lead to government being, quite irresponsible because it doesn't have to pay any interest on these, very low rate of interest on these borrowings, etc. But I think the time has come when you have situations like this, which are really, really completely out of the blue and unexpected, and, even worse than, I would say, the 2008 crisis, because that was purely a financial crisis, whereas this is something that is in the real sector and also affects human lives. So I think there would be a case to relook that and allow the RBI to participate and fund the government directly. It would have some implications, would lead to inflation definitely post the crisis, but that would be post the crisis. At least we would have got over this crisis, which is something that we really, really cannot afford to ignore. It is as it is. I think the government has been a little late behind the curve in announcing the package. So I was going to Ruchi's flashes, if I remember right, that this government is still working out the details by 31st March. It says, well, much too late. It should have been done yesterday, day before yesterday if possible. Because when you lock down people, particularly those in the informal sector, you have to come out with some means of ensuring that they have a livelihood. Direct benefit transfers, ration shops, soup kitchens, the works. So I think here the government can, in fact, take a leaf out of the books of the Kerala state government, which has gone out and announced a 20,000 crore package. And yesterday we had the Prime Minister announcing a 15,000 crore package for medical equipment. That's hopefully just the beginning, and there is much more to come, but it needs to come immediately rather than later.
Hi, Maithili. Good evening. This is Ruchi Bhatia. Just wanted to get a sense from you. Now we are hearing that to fund this big mega package that the Modi government has promised India Inc. and the commoners as well, we're given to understand that the government may look at a higher borrowing program for FY21 as against the 7.8 lakh crore borrowing that was already earmarked as a part of the government's budget. And RBI will directly be buying some of these bonds by the government that this would mean that they would be printing fresh money to do so. This is something that the RBI has always been reluctant to go ahead with, to do. But now we are hearing that these are extraordinary times, and the government and the RBI are kind of finalizing how RBI too can directly fund a part of this deficit. How are you looking at something like this, a move like this?
No, as I just told Nayantara, that because this is something that the government and the RBI had agreed to phase out. Earlier, RBI used to fund the government's deficit directly by printing notes to purchase of what was known as ad hoc bills. But that during the time of Dr. Rangarajan, this was phased out because in order to ensure that there's some discipline imposed on the government by the government itself, in all fairness. So this ad hoc treasury bills were phased out by an agreement that was signed between the RBI and the government. Currently, the RBI does not participate in primary auction of government borrowings. It's only in the secondary market through its OMO that the RBI is a participant. But I think at times like this, which are really, as I said, very exceptional, maybe once in a generation, once in a lifetime, whatever you want to call it, force major conditions where everything comes to a standstill, and it's not just a financial crisis, it is much more affecting human lives. There is a case to relook at that agreement and temporarily, I repeat, temporarily reopen that, clause or whatever you want, relook at that agreement and allow the RBI to directly fund Government of India through purchase at primary auctions.
Maithili, just one last question before we let you go. I'm also given to understand that this package, the size of this package could be anywhere between 1.5 lakh crores to about 3 lakh crores. India Inc. had also demanded that there's going to be a massive impact that we will see on the Indian economy, and at least 1% of the GDP should be used for, pumping in more money into the economy, close to the tune of 2 lakh crore rupees. How are you looking at the kind of fund allocations that the government perhaps is looking at, and which would be the key sectors where the government can look to put this money?
Apart from the sectors that were directly affected by this, even before we saw the full impact, as in terms of aviation, communications, in terms of also entertainment, hospitality, these were the sectors that were very crucially affected. So I think these sectors would directly require some kind of support. But apart from that, I think there is a large informal sector where people really do not have any job security at all. So there should be some system of putting money directly in their accounts through we have the direct benefit transfer. The mechanism is there. Almost everybody in India now does have a Jan Dhan account. So I think the mechanics of it should not be very difficult. It's only a question of finding the funds. And once you realize that there is no alternative but to opening the spigot if necessary through printing notes, then I think it should not be an issue. Also, I think it's very important. Many large corporates have come forward and said that they're not going to be turning off staff, they're not going to be cutting salary. So I think it would be very good incentive for more companies to come forward if government says that we will shoulder 50% of the burden of whatever, the wage bills that you incur during this period if you have a loss, or your profits fall or whatever the situation is. Something like that. So that more and more companies are incentivized to come out in support of their workforce, because larger organized sector will not have a problem. It's a small kirana shops, a small hotels, eateries. Those are the kind of people who really don't have the wherewithal. So if the government were to incentivize and do something on those lines, it would help. Certainly the FM's announcement yesterday about raising the default limit for MSMEs to invoke the IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, that would be a big help. Because now it's only if your default is up to 1 crore, beyond crosses 1 crore, that banks will take you to the IBC. Otherwise, they are free to kind of give you any kind of hand-holding, evergreening, whatever you want to kind of call it, is it possible. So that, I think, will be of help also to the MSME sectors. But the most important point, I think, is that the government cannot dilly-dally. It must come out of this package as soon as possible. I think we're already a little late. We need to rapidly ramp up on this.
Oh, absolutely, Maitri, you've hit the nail on its head. In fact, something that Nayantara also asked the finance minister yesterday on why there is a delay on announcing this package. But I'm now given to understand that as early as next week, this package could be announced and a much needed relief could come in for India Inc. as well. Maitri, always a pleasure chatting with you. On that note, Nayantara, it's back to you in the studios.
Thanks a lot for that, Ruchi, and see you again soon on air when we are anchoring together. So that's the big ET now exclusive.